The democratic landscape is fast changing all around us, whether that's voters who are more disengaged than they've ever been before. They're moving their support away from the two main parties and they're supporting a much wider range of smaller parties, and that's giving us a very unpredictable, what we've called at the Electoral Reform Society, even a lottery election, and a strong likelihood of a power-sharing administration in the years to come. What's really important, we feel, is that public service and financial professionals really have an influence over the changing democratic landscape, and that we don't just look, for example, at fiscal devolution, but we look at democratic devolution as well. If we're going to see more powers being devolved to the local level, we need really good public scrutiny of those powers at the same time. So I think that public finance and all who work in the finance part of public services need to have a really big say over how that landscape is changing. The referendum in Scotland was quite incredible for the scale of public engagement, and I think what it meant was that nobody can ever say again that citizens are not engaged with politics, provided that the question is important enough. And I was actually in Edinburgh recently and looking at some of the research that's been done since the referendum on public attitudes to constitution making and the like, and all the evidence is that this has led people to have an increased appetite for ongoing engagement in politics, and I hope that's something that the rest of the UK can build on. We're definitely in a multi-party era, and coalitions, minority governments, other forms of power-sharing administrations are going to be much more likely in the future. So I think coalition and other forms of power sharing are definitely here to stay. At the Electoral Reform Society, we're about to publish a report where we highlight the very different varieties of power sharing administrations that you can see both in other countries but also close to home in Scotland and Wales. And we think it's really important that public and politicians understand that there can be a British way of doing coalitions, and that it's really for all of us to try to kind of influence how they adapt and evolve to the particular political culture that we have. Electoral reform is already back on the agenda, and I'm being asked all the time about the injustices of the first past the post system. Unfortunately, what's going to happen in the May 2015 general election is that the system can't really cope with the complexities of multi-party politics. So voters' voices are not going to be heard, and their votes are not going to be fairly translated into seats in Parliament. So I think that will really put national electoral reform firmly back on the political map.